So, Jeff, really, the reason why I wanted to have you on the Real Estate Rundown is because the question that is burning in everybody's mind right now, from the tenant to the owner to the banker that made the loan on the property management company, do the tenants owe rent? And at what point is the government stepping in? What's everybody doing right now? Because we just passed yesterday or early this morning a $2 trillion spending bill that is supposed to help people. And quite frankly, nobody really knows, right? So how is executive management services staying in front of all this information?
Well, probably like you and many others, there's definitely been a struggle. Everybody's in this warning mode, right? They're stressing out over the future. They're stressing out over their jobs. So I think like many of us, we're going online. We're trying to look for whatever updated information we can get. If the computer or the internet works, then you might be able to find some things, right? So, for EMS, what we're doing is a little bit something different. So, we're trying to involve our community, our residents within our community. We are all in this, pandemic together.
Yeah, you're right.
It's not the responsibility of a property owner or a property manager to come up with a game plan by themselves. It's going to take a community to come together. Having one person, a property manager, do the research to find out where the resources are coming from, will spend you a lot more time finding it than if you had 100. So for EMS, we really have reached out to our residents and we are asking for their support. Most of them are either working from home. Some of them might not be working currently, so they have time.
Yeah. Jeff, and you bring up a good point. I saw in the market today that over 3 million new unemployment claims have been filed in the last week. What does that really mean what's your take on that?
That's a great question. Again, it's a mindset. I get it. We're dealing with a virus and we're seeing on the news, people who have been affected by this and people who are dying from it.
Jeff, what we've got is, as you can see, we've got 3 million new unemployment claims, and that is going to be a trickle-down effect as to who can pay rent. How are you seeing that is going to affect your guys' bottom line?
Yeah, the unemployment rate, it's scary, right? When you hear the term 3 million people, but Shannon, how many people, what's the population in the United States? Do you know that number?
Well, the last we heard from Brian Williams or Wilson or whatever on NBC, that it was 327 million people in the U.S.
Okay, so I'm not a mathematician, but 3 million compared to that number is a little number, right?
It would be less than 1% for sure.
Okay.
And I think our current unemployment before the virus was hovering between 3 and 4.
That's right. So, and where I'm getting at here is, at this point, I don't see where there needs to be an alarm, right? We're still within that parameter of having a very healthy economy.
Right. So Jeff, so I hear you, and it's not that I don't disagree with you, but here we are, Jeff, we're somewhere we've never, ever been before. We are so connected as a nation and as a world. The last flu type thing that went to the kind of numbers we're likely to see here was back in 1969. and we barely had good news coverage once a night at that point, let alone instant coverage like the internet. And so what are you doing, Jeff? How are you dealing with the barrage of, whether that's people from your communities or owners of your communities, demanding you give them information or give them, coming to you with their thoughts or hypothesis on what you should do? How are you stemming that tide?
Property management is difficult in itself, right? It's not just collecting rent and paying bills. There's so much more to it. And when you throw something like the coronavirus into the equation, it really complicates things because, and I don't think people realize this, property managers are a liaison between the tenant and the property owner.
Yeah, they really are.
So we're dealing with twice as many things than probably a normal industry, because we have to have answers for tenants and we have to have answers for owners.
So Jeff, are you saying that you're coming up with your own answers and taking that to the owners and taking that to the tenants? Are you guys?
No. So, my staff and I spend probably 2 to 4 hours a day now researching online options, our local government, it's all over the internet. So we've really taken the time to, look into what other states are doing. We who are currently in the state of Idaho, we have different laws and different parameters in this state. Every state's different, right? So, but we can take a lot from other states, so we do gather a lot of data from, other states, other counties. And we really feel that the best course of action is to communicate. I just heard the other day, I think it was the Idaho Statesman, where they're, in their article, they say, residents are going to get free rent for April. And, if you're reading, the internet in the morning before you cup of coffee or whatever, you think, woohoo, I'm getting free rent for April. Yay. But what you don't realize is, well, yeah, those are for properties that are city owned.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a trickery going on there, because the average person would read that article and go, awesome, I don't have to worry about April rent, now I can focus on May. So there's a lot, at least for a property manager, you really have to over communicate to your residents, because they're going to hit you up first thing in the morning and they're going to say, hey, thanks for waiving that rent, and you're going to say, well, actually we're not.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I want to ask you a question, and this is completely subjective, and I know it's going to vary, town to town, tenant to tenant, but, what percentage of people do you think, because this is every landlord's concern, is it, because they don't have to, my tenant's not going to pay. What percentage of the people that are not needing the help or don't necessarily qualify for the help in that they've not lost their job, what percentage of your tenants do you believe will unfairly take advantage of the landlord?
Honestly, I think it would be minimal. You
believe people are fair and honest for the most part.
I really do. You're always going to have somebody. There's always somebody in the crowd, right?
So what do you think? I'm just drilling on this because we hear so many people giving opinions, Jeff. I want you to give me yours. I want a percentage. What percentage of people that are not eligible would not be eligible under this Relief Act, or just haven't encountered any change in their environment? What percentage do you believe would take advantage of that, even if they shouldn't?
Less than 10%.
Less than 10%. Okay. Because, that's not something I know. I'm not in direct contact with people, but I've been to the grocery store enough times and watched somebody drop a $10 bill And 9 out of 10 times, you're probably right. Somebody else is going to pick it up and tap the person on the shoulder and say, hey, excuse me, you've dropped something. So, that's important. And so now when you're being approached by people, you've got your owners coming to you. Do your owners have all the answers figured out? Are you guys working on that plan together? Are you coming to them with suggestions? What's going on there, Jeff?
Yeah. Before I get into that, I would like to comment on your previous question. We, executive management services, have, before the governor has, ordered the stay-at-home, order, we had already been reaching our owners and our tenants, giving them some options, and letting them know not to worry about this, that we'll work with them. We've given them an opportunity to come forward and have conversations about, are we going to have to work with you in April and or May and the future? We have, out of 200 residents currently, we have had 2 people who have come forward to say that they have some hardships.
Yeah.
So my point being is, I think the majority of people, at least for April, are going to have a paycheck. They're going to be able to pay their rent. Most of them are still working from home. And, I think in the bigger picture of things, it's the May and June months that I think are a little bit concerning. But, with the stimulus package going on and all the hype, it sounds like we're going to have that under control, and we're going to get things back to normal very quickly.
Yeah. Jeff, I don't doubt that. So you mentioned the stimulus package, I think that was passed either last night or this morning, $2 trillion, man. And we know how the government likes to do stuff. It's not all about actually the rent, right? So how, are you getting owners come to you and ask you what's the stimulus package get me? Are you getting tenants that are coming to you? What's the stimulus package get me? Are you guys having to become the expert for your owners?
For sure we are. A lot of owners have come forward, especially the owners who it's their income property. They rely on those rents to pay their bills, to keep the property going. And, that's a scary situation for those property owners. And, they're coming to us. We're the experts, right? We should know everything. So, we've had some challenges in you can't accommodate everybody. Everybody has a different thought process on what course of action you should be taking. And the reality is, there is no right answer at this point. You still have laws that you have to follow.
Right.
And we don't know what this stimulus is going to do and when it's going to pay and how it's going to help people at this point. So,
right.
What I've encouraged my owners to do is, look, the reality is you're not going to evict people who don't pay their rent for April. You're not. Because why? Because the courts aren't going to accept your unlawful detainer notice. They're not going to file it right now.
Right. Because they're closed, right?
Yeah. Here in Boise, Idaho, I think the end of April is when they said they would start taking some of these filings, but that could change now that the governor's placed this at-home order. So, with that said, I think owners need to be a little bit more creative these days. We've done some really great things on some of our projects where the owners that we work for have been gracious enough to implement a proactive plan, which is a rent stimulus plan, if you will, that basically says, hey, look, if you are affected by this virus, whether you've lost your job or you've become ill, we want to help. We're not saying that we're going to waive the rent, but we're willing to put you on a payment plan. We're willing to waive late fees. We're willing to you don't have to pay the water, trash, and sewer fee or your cable and internet if a property offers that. These mandated fees can be waived.
Yeah.
Partial payments, those type of things that is so taboo for property management. You have to pay the rent on the first, and if you don't, oh, by the fifth or the sixth, you're going to get a 3-day. Well, let's calm down a little bit and let's work with people because they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, Jeff, and that makes so much sense too, because, when you look at it, I mean, from a property owner standpoint, if I lose a tenant today, today's the 27th, if I lose a tenant today, 26th, they're going to, I'm going to take a week to clean it up. I'm going to take another week or two to advertise with the, just in a normal setting. Obviously, we don't know what the coronavirus would do, but by the time we get another tenant on the hook, we get them in there, we've lost 1 month's rent. So we've lost 1/12 of the revenue that would be coming in on that unit, where if we work with that tenant and we take half rent in April and half rent in May, then effectively you've kept the tenant. You haven't risked trying to find a new tenant in the coronavirus environment, and you've ensured that the person that does need a home that has taken care of the place is still going to be there. And worst case scenario, you've got a deferment on the rent that you pushed out, and you're not having to pay the fees that are associated with the turnover. So it makes a lot of sense, Jeff, that you guys at Executive Management Services are taking this proactive approach. How are your owners liking the thought? I mean, let's just get real. Nobody likes the thought of not getting the rent. But how are your owners liking the thought process of getting someone on a payment plan and not losing the tenant versus being the cold-hearted jerk that throws the guy in the street because he missed rent by 5 days?
Yeah, I think the majority of owners, just like the population, are rational. They understand the circumstances and they do want to help. So most of my owners are fine with these options. The last thing that they want is to sit on vacancy, especially during these times, like you said. So, yes, they are wanting to help. And they're willing to help, but they're also scared because, they've been able to enjoy this high occupancy, this steady income, and then something like this happens to all of us, and then now we're stressing out. Property owners have a big responsibility. They should be planning for the inevitable, the unforeseen, because at the end of the day, it's their responsibility to pay that mortgage. It's not a tenant's responsibility.
Right.
So, I feel for them because God forbid if we had a bigger disaster upon us where it would cause a building to go completely vacant, then what?
Right. Jeff, too, and I think a lot of people, at least from the way that I'm perceiving it in the media, which, I take it with a grain of salt. But I see it that, the media is portraying, property owners, multifamily owners as, like Scrooge McDuck. They're dropping gold coins on the way to work. And the reality is, Jeff, I mean, aren't most of your owners, aren't they just regular people that employ your company because they have full-time jobs and they're developing cash flow for retirement? I mean, isn't that really what, who the majority of your owners are?
Absolutely. They pay a mortgage themselves or a rent.
Right.
So people always look at a property owner and the first thing they think of is, well, they're lucky, they're rich, and that's not necessarily true. All of their money is locked into this asset,
right?
And sometimes it's not as easily. You're not able to get that money out of that asset as easily. So so yeah, they're just like you and me.
Right. So, one of the things that I've started doing and analyzing with my stuff, Jeff, is I've been looking at a BRE formula, which really is a break even formula. So I go through, and I do this when I stress test my deals to put them together, where I look at it and go, hey, if I pay this much money, and I got 50 units, and today's market rent is $1,000 a unit. Where can I go with my rent before I start to have trouble paying my mortgage? And I find the spot where I can really break even. And so then I look at that and I say, hey, I've got a break even point in here that is at 78%. So I look at that and I got 50 units. I got $1,000 a unit. That's 50 grand. I can collect 78% of that before I have any hardship to myself. And so, one of the things that you and I have talked about and we've done with our properties is we've looked at where we can go financially with that property to make sure that we're not dipping into, or at least I know how much we're dipping into it based on where we're going to go with the tenants. So I've already given you a dollar amount that you can discount every unit without having to come back to me to give you some leeway. But I've also put you in a position where you can look at it and say, hey, I got 75 units that are paying just fine. I got 5 units that need half rent. And the real problem with that math right there is I started out the equation with 50 units and now I'm already at 80. But I like to grow my properties. You know how that goes, Jeff, right? But so we got 30 units that are paying full rent. We got another 5 units that are paying half rent, and kind of a smattering from there of what people are able to pay. And I think that's important. I think having that break even thought process of, hey, if I can just get to even this month, if I can just get to even over the next couple of months, maybe that's a forbearance with some of these tenants. Maybe that's getting a promissory note. Maybe that's allowing them to take their security deposit toward, half a month's rent or something like that. I mean, those are the things that are important. And Jeff, one of the things that we've been able to do in the communities that you manage for me is we've been able to really create not an us against them feeling, but a togetherness of it all. Hey, we're humans in a coronavirus environment. And landlord's got to meet his obligations, tenants got to meet his obligations, and everybody's in a brave new world where obligations aren't as easy to meet as they were a month ago. And we've even talked about giving amenity credits back for people that aren't getting to use the amenities because we've got them closed down. Giving up profit centers in the cable and internet, like you'd mentioned, just as a way to say, hey, we're trying. And Jeff, when we look at that, that really has made a difference. How has that played out with your staff and the residents when they're approaching the tenant going, hey, by the way, before you even ask, we've got some goodies here for you?
It's funny because I think what we've experienced, and I think what you'll find, is when you're coming at a situation in a proactive manner and out of good faith, you're in return, you're going to get good faith.
Right.
And what I mean is there's a lot more honesty out there than you think. So you're going to have people who are going to come forward and say, I'm going to be honest with you, I got April and I got May, but June I might struggle. And
yeah.
These are the conversations that we love to have, because that helps us help them, and it helps us plan. Like renewals, for example, we need to be keeping our eye on those renewals. We can't afford to have people move out ever, especially now during this time. So our eyes are on that prize, and we're already hitting up renewals because we know the name of the game is to keep them to stay. no matter what.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, Jeff. That's a really important thing because a lot of people forget that. So what do you think percentage wise, if we got $1,000 unit or a $500 unit, let's go with a percentage. What percentage of the cost of the rent would you attribute to a turnover from the time a tenant moves out to a new tenant moves in? What percentage of a month's rent are you spending of the owner's money, not collecting, but spending to get that from one tenant to another?
I mean, we're probably half.
So 50%.
50%.
So if I'm in a situation where I've got, $1,000 unit and I got to turn it, I'm gonna not only not collect my $1,000, I'm gonna spend $500. So I'm really, as an owner, I'm out $1,500. Whereas if I look at that, and I think this is really, and I really appreciate you and I having this conversation 2 weeks ago when you came to me and say, hey, we've got a bunch of renewals coming in the next couple of months. Instead of spending the money flipping the units, let's spend the money keeping the tenants and making them feel like they matter, making them feel like we care, because we do. And it's a math equation to some extent, but you begin to think of your tenants as part of your family, to some degree, and working with them feels better than advertising with Google and apartments.com and Show Mojo, spending your money over there to get a new tenant to replace this one because you guys fell out of love, And so, I mean, what you've shown me, and I really appreciate this, and it'll be obviously the time will tell, because today we don't necessarily know. We've got, you've got a couple that are coming forward, but the time will tell as we come past through our renewal season over the next 6 months, through the coronavirus and the successful management of that through our healthcare system, and everything kind of plays out. It'll be interesting to see, but I can really appreciate what you brought to the table when you came forward and you said, hey guys, we need to start thinking big picture. We need to start thinking long term. We need to reach out to our tenants, give them a reason to like us better than moving. And when you said that, it really made a ton of sense to me, because you're right. If we give them half price rent for the next 3 months, April, May, and June, not that we're necessarily going to, but if we've given them half price rent, that's the same as a turnover. And so offering them to renew their lease now and commit to another 20 months of lease in an effort to give them some reduced rents, it makes financial sense for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, being really creative with renewals, for example, is to me is the bread and butter of it all. It is easier, at least in the Boise market, to rent an apartment. Easy. We have tons of people coming into the area that are still, wanting to move, and there's just not enough product available. So, to me, the struggle here is to keep them in, to renew them. And we're giving away upfront concessions to people we don't even know, yet the people we do know, we're not willing to do anything for them, and that's where I like to see a change in that philosophy within property management from a nationwide perspective, because we should be taking care of the people who really do take care of us.
Yeah. And, Jeff, just to clarify, you're seeing all your owners, they're really embracing this thought process that let's take care of our tenant, taking care of me, taking care of the tenant, so that, we don't have those issues, right? I mean, you're not seeing there be any animosity or anything between your tenants and your owners at this point.
No, not at all. And I don't want to say that it's all peaches and cream either. There's every property is different. Every owner is different.
Right.
But, in multifamily, I would agree with you. I think that there is a moment where, the community comes together and we help one another. And, for me, to save money on turnover, which is a big part of a lot of these properties' budgets. I mean, you're spending money on cleaning and carpet and damage and paint and all this crazy stuff. You know, if you threw somebody a $500 gift card to stay put for another year, they might do that.
And so what you're suggesting, and what most of your owners are doing, is they're looking at that and saying, hey, give them $250 off for April and $250 off for May, and get them to sign a lease early. You know, I think that's genius,
Yeah.
Jeff. I really do. You know, it's awesome to hear, Jeff, that executive management services and your owners are taking the fight, or the information battle to the tenant, and
Yeah.
and bringing them current information. You know, we talked before the show about your newsletter that you're putting out on a weekly basis, you know, where you're giving them coronavirus updates as far as what new federal programs are coming out, what new state programs are coming out, so that if there's something that the tenant has to do to apply for it, you guys are already putting that together. And I think that that's really really awesome on your part, because that's really taking the asset management to another level that I've always known that you've done. But it makes it so the owner doesn't have to think about it. It makes it so the tenant doesn't necessarily have to think about it. But how are you dealing with that when the tenant comes to you and says, hey, listen, not only did I get free rent from the government, I got a unicorn too? How are you dealing with that, where the information's not clear, but the tenant is saying something like that? I get free rent in a new Corvette.
Yeah, it's, you know, we don't like to be the bad guys, you know, because we're the ones who are on the front line. You know,
Right.
you know, when we have to tell somebody that they're being too loud, you know, we are the ones who have to address that. You know, when somebody can't pay their rent and they have, you know, 5 kids, and you know, we have to evict them. I mean, those are some serious things that we have to deal with, and it doesn't feel good. But you know, we have a job to do. So a lot of the times, you know, just like everything else outside of coronavirus, communication. You know, somebody comes in and says that they're getting that unicorn and that free rent. You know, you have to be effective with your communication and strategic to let them know that that's not necessarily what's going to happen, and here's why, and here is the information that we have found that tells us what you're reading or whatever information you're getting is not accurate.
So basically, you're turning them into your detective, because they're coming to you with the government coupon that says, "Hey, here's where I get my free unicorn."
Yeah, pretty much.
So, well, that's awesome, Jeff. You know, it's always great to hear that people are being progressive in this economy. And you know, one of the things that I see all the time is that, you know, communication is the key to successful business. And once again, you know, no surprise that executive management services is producing successful business by having that key to dealing with what is going on in their market. And, you know, Jeff, I want to thank you for your time. And, you know, everybody that's listening, I want you to go to executivemanagementservices.com, check out Jeff's site there. And I know that Jeff's got a free offer for you, Jeff. What if people go to your website, what are they getting for free?
Well, we have, you know, we have some good information about who we are. We do have a team of professionals. So there is some history of where we come from. You know, although our company is fairly new, we're not new at the business, and I think that's important to say. But really, what we do and what makes me feel good about what I do is to help property owners and investors with their income property. So we can look at a particular location, and we could really do some good market analysis to make sure that what you either have already invested in or what you're going to invest in is worth it, monetarily. So that's a service that we do for free where you can go to our website. We have a link, contact us. You can fill out that information. It comes directly to me, and we can do a one-on-one, and I can show you the numbers to see if the numbers work for you.
So that's awesome, Jeff. So they can find you at executivemanagementservices.com. They can go to the contact us button. They can schedule an appointment with you.
That's right.
They can kind of go through the scenario. You could tell them where they could either be making more money or saving money on their costs. That's awesome. And that's a free service that you provide to everyone in your service area or nationwide.
Well, currently we're here in the state of Idaho. And that's where we happen to have the majority of our business. So we're not necessarily nationwide, but who knows?
Right. Well, Jeff, with Executive Management Services, guys, say thanks to Jeff. Go to his website, check it out, executivemanagementservices.com. And Jeff, as always, we appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate it.
Stay safe out there, buddy.